people living our lives.
Welcome to We're People First, the Jeff Moyer Show. Here's Christy Moyer.
Welcome, everybody. We are so very excited that you're back with us. This is our second show. If you missed our first one, you can see it. We'll tell you how to do that later. We had over 1,200 views between that show and this one.
2,100.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for the correction. 2,100. I, put the numbers backwards, We had college professors that we heard from. One of them that we know made an assignment for her graduate students to watch the show and comment. We had a wonderful comment about that and gained a new fan. And I hope you are spreading the word too. We just would love to have more and more people. We're just so excited about that. Now, before we get into the actual show, I forgot to give you the audio description of the room here that we're broadcasting from. But before I even do that, I want to alert you that at the bottom of your screen, you can opt to have the closed caption on or off. And that's your choice. If you think that you want it on or off, that's your choice. So behind me now is the room that Jeff has set up as his studio. This is kind of a long, 20-foot long by 10-foot wide room. And so you're seeing half of it. And the other half is where his assistant sits if he has one that come in. I sit there when you can't see me off camera. So to one side, you can see a roll top desk that we have opened because he's got his guitar laying there that he's going to be playing throughout the show. On the other side is an upright Yamaha piano. Behind the piano, you can kind of see this long tree branch thing sticking up there. That is a didgeridoo. Then way in the back wall, you can see all of his recording equipment. So I think that's helpful. Jeff, jump in there if I'm not doing it. Oh, the harmonium, I forgot to describe that. That's sitting on top of the piano, on top of the desk. And I've got it like a mini keyboard that I discovered a couple years ago as I was training to be a yoga teacher. And I said to Jeff, oh, I really like that. And so he encouraged me to get one. I have to confess, I haven't been playing it, but I will. That will come. So did I miss anything, Jeff?
The ship.
Oh, the ship. Yes, it's very hard to see the angle. You were only seeing the bottom of it. But it's a ship with sails that Jeff's father created. It took him 5 months.
Yeah.
5 months to do, and it's quite beautiful. And you will be seeing more of that ship because one of the shows that we're going to do around Father's Day, Jeff is dedicating to his dad. And so you'll get to see that really up close at that time. So we're going to launch into what our show today is going to be. And it is packed. It is just packed full. And we're going to give you a little rundown of the topics. There's going to be a People First Consciousness segment. Then there's going to be a Disability Rights History segment because this month, April, is when the 504 regulations were signed. And Jeff was part of that sit-in in San Francisco, and he's going to be talking about that in depth. Third thing on our agenda is the climate crisis. And he's got a new song that has just been recorded, and he's got quite a chorus lined up for that, including his daughter and his two grandsons. We'll talk more about that later. Then instead of an instrument corner this time, because of our interesting topics, we're going to have what we're calling the Educators Corner. And you'll be given some resources in case you want to do more reading or investigating on the topics that we cover today. Excuse me. And fifth is a new section, and we're hoping we'll have it all the time now. It's send us your music. And so we're asking all of you folks if you want to be on the show, you're going to record a short little 25-second chorus from We're People First. And we have a sample of that that you'll get to see kind of, and there's a form that you'll be able to fill out, and it tells you how to submit that. So right now we're going to launch into People's First. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, I forgot to mention our special guest this time. If you remember, we had a special guest last time. This time, it's the Taylors from Cleveland, Philip and Sarah Taylor, and they have such a great story to share about what Sarah has been so instrumental in doing in bringing wind power off of Lake Erie to Cleveland. And Jeff wrote a song for that, which you're going to get to hear later on in the show too. So now let's go on to, excuse me, People First Consciousness. Are you ready, Jeff?
Well, hello again. Such a pleasure to be doing this show, and all of the excitement, anticipation, preparation, and engagement with all of you through this past couple of weeks. We've heard from so many friends and new friends that have tuned into the show. Last session, we talked a bit about people first consciousness, and I want to add a couple points today. One is that when people think about the words people first, I talked last time about people first language, about how we refer to our listeners with and without disabilities. We don't talk about disability as a defining noun. For example, I don't say, I hope that the blind are listening. It would be individuals with visual disabilities, for example. But we've talked about that. Today, I want to talk about the actual organization called People First. The way I came to write the song, We're People First, which is the theme of the show and comes up in many ways, I was invited to play at a People First convention in Michigan. People First is an organization of people with cognitive disabilities and their advocates and families. A wonderful organization that's done so much to further the cause of equity, equality, and deinstitutionalization and community living for people with cognitive disabilities. There's another organization that has, some People First chapters have renamed themselves Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, or Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered organization, chapters set up without any connection to People First. But there are still many People First chapters at a local level, at a state level, and nationally. My hat's off to them. And I was asked to play at one of their conventions. And on the way there, I thought, well, I've got to write a song that deals with that topic. So the song came to me, We're People First. And I was up on a stage, there were 150 people there. And I said, this is really our song. I'd like to sing it with you. So I taught them the chorus. And I said, so now we're all going to sing together. Well, as I started to sing, one by one, people climbed up onto the stage and then helped their friends up. Before you know it, 150 people were on stage with me because they took me seriously. And in fact, we were singing it together. It is their song. It is our song. All of us are people first. Awesome. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the news and what we've been seeing in this last 2 weeks. I think it's been 2 weeks, as the horrible, tragic murder of George Floyd has been dealt with in the legal context. We all have seen that video over and over again of George Floyd, life being crushed out of him. There's a young man named Cornelius Frederick who was covered on MSNBC last Sunday. The story as part of the discussion of Sequel, which is a for-profit organization which houses young people in need, people in the kids in the corrective justice system,
foster system.
The foster system, and who are looking and for states who are looking for places to put kids that they no longer have an institution for. So there's this for-profit. And the video that was shared was exactly like the George Floyd video. The 16-year-old who threw a piece of bread, having 3 attendants grab him, force him to the ground, sit on him, and kill him. A 16-year-old, a Black 16-year-old, whose crime was being devalued because of his race, because of his disability, because of his family status. So as we look at this national shame that's being portrayed through the George Floyd experience, let's also remember that it happens all the time.
In fact, doesn't this kind of remind you of what happened with your brother 50 years ago?
Thank you for that, honey.
And the reason I brought it up is today is National Siblings Day.
National Siblings Day, that's correct.
Yes.
And when you told me, of course, it's correct. You said so. My younger brother, Mark, who is as much a part of my soul as my breathing is, was institutionalized because of having a cognitive disability and having no schools that would accept him, and the neighborhood being a cruel and violent place in the early 1960s. When Mark was institutionalized, when he was 16, he tried to run away, and he was grabbed by a policeman with an attack dog. That dog was turned on my brother. For the rest of his life, he was terrified of all dogs. And then between the policeman and the attendants within his institution, he was beaten so badly, I wouldn't have recognized him had I not known that it was my brother. So my brother endured the suffering of being devalued. And People First consciousness is to understand that regardless of the category, when we devalue people, we exclude them, then ridicule is okay, and then violence happens and we're bystanders. Let us never be bystanders to any exclusion or ridicule or certainly violence against another human being. That's People First consciousness. Have I covered it?
I believe so. I think you were going to talk a little bit about why some people are more apt to be treated that way, because we've been made very conscious of that there's a privileged segment.
Yes, yes. In fact, haven't we all been sensitized to our privilege? We talk about this all the time, and there is an able-bodied privilege and a cognitive ability privilege having to do with people who are valued versus people who are devalued. And I think I covered
right.
that, didn't
Well,
I?
What we've discovered, I mean, it seems to be pretty straightforward. People that are Caucasian, male, excuse me, white, Caucasian, correct? Those tend to have built-in privileges that you're not even aware of if you're in that class.
If you're non-disabled.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now add the disability picture and that does change.
Yeah. For example, I was told I had thought I might work as a TV reporter at one point in my life.
You shared that last time, honey.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. You know what? I'll tell you what.
That's
Not
okay.
only does she have to cook my food, she has to remember what I have done. Burden.
So
it's
I
not
think,
easy to be Christy Moyer.
I think that we've done a good job with the People First Consciousness
Good.
section.
And now
we're going to get ready for the next section.
Disability
Disabilities
history.
Rights History.
Good. Okay. We might have.
A lot of juggling going on here, but here's your set here. Sure, you want to put that on?
Good. Okay. Yes, as Christy mentioned, April is a significant month in the disability history arena, because this was the month 44 years ago when beginning on April 5th, the longest occupation of a federal building in United States history was staged by 125 people with and without disabilities at the federal building in San Francisco. Let me give you a little history that precedes it that you really need to understand in order to understand why that happened.
So I'm going to interrupt you a minute just to let people that need an audio description. Jeff has now put on his harmonica brace, so he's going to be playing a harmonica and a guitar. So he's got the guitar also he's holding. So and he's got his headset back on. So there he is. And he's
I'm wearing a headset with a microphone attached, so that I'm not having to think about mic position. So in 1972, for the first time, the Rehabilitation Act was first passed after the First World War to give vocational rehabilitation to veterans. And as time evolved, that expanded and expanded and expanded. And in 1972, Jack Duncan, who was one of my professors in graduate school, who was the attorney who worked for the Senate Select Committee on Education and Labor, he wrote all of the disability rights legislation. And he was told, include in this something that, addresses civil rights for people with disabilities, because we're getting complaints that they're not included in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which protects everyone else except people with disabilities from exclusion or prejudicial treatment in education, employment, or services. So he wrote a very elegant 36-word section called Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 that said that any otherwise qualified person with a disability can't be excluded from any services from an organization using federal money. And that means all school districts, hospitals, and anyone who uses federal money at all concerning employment. Well, he wrote that, and he said it was so apple pie, it passed both the House and the Senate without so much as a comment, markup, and it went to President Nixon's desk. And then the lobbies of school districts and hospitals and colleges got involved, and they said, no, you don't. They don't want it. Nixon vetoed the Rehab Act. First time in history that had happened. Okay. His veto was overridden by Congress. It became law. But in order for a law to live and breathe, there have to be regulations. And those are supposed to be promulgated or released to the public within, I think it's 180 days of the law being passed.
Wow.
Nixon came and went without regulations. Ford came and went, still no regulations. There was a delaying tactic. It would be released for public comment. Then it would be taken back into the administration. Then it would be released. And when Jimmy Carter ran for president, there were a really good set of regulations in place. He promised in Warm Springs, Georgia, the place of Franklin Roosevelt's polio rehabilitation hospital or center with physical rehabilitation, that if he was elected president, he promised the disability community through the American Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities, a wonderful organization that no longer exists, that if elected, he would sign the regulations as then drafted. He came into office in 1977, and lo and behold, he didn't sign the regulations. I was on the board of ACCD, American Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities. We had a friend inside the Carter administration, and he let us know that they were drafting new regulations that said separate but equal. Well, it wasn't going to work in the case of race. We might remember, those of us who studied American history, that was struck down by the Supreme Court in Brown versus the Board of Education, separate but equal. And people with disabilities said, absolutely not. We said, we're going to give you to April 4th to sign the regulations as you promised. He did not. Instead, new regulations were floated that were far cry from what he had promised. And so in 8 of the 10 federal building district offices, regional offices, there were demonstrations. I was involved with the one in San Francisco. I was in a planning meeting the day before, and it was a teach-in about what was happening with the law. And then I said, have we rented a bullhorn? No. Have we thought of any music? No. I said, I'll take care of that. I picked up a bullhorn on the bus, went home, got out my Pete Seeger records and listened to them. And I found the song Eyes on the Prize. And I said, that would be a perfect song to focus in on what we're doing. So we had a rally during which we had the support of, even at the beginning of the demonstration, the Black civil rights community. We had Ed Roberts, who is a great leader in the disability rights movement. I'll talk about it in a
That's another show, isn't it?
That's another show.
Mm-hmm.
And Judy Heumann spoke, Ed Roberts spoke. Then I played this song, which I'll play for you. We entered the building, and for 26 days, 125 people stayed there. I had a young son, infant son. I came and went. I brought music into the demonstration. But this is the song that began the demonstration, and it also became the theme song for a BBC documentary on the U.S. disability rights movement.
Before you do that, Jeff, I think you might want to mention one of the big organizers, one of the women.
Mary Jane Owen.
Mary Jane Owen.
Let me cover her after I sing the song.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Just didn't want you to forget.
No, I won't. Bill, so I'll cover Mary Jane after I sing this. Civil rights were knocking at our door, but Carter wouldn't stand on 504. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. You gotta hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. After 4 years of delay, we come to claim the ground we gained. We had our eye on the prize and we held on. Hold on. We had to hold on. We had our eyes on the prize. We held on. A movement standing strong and tight, with one dream to win our civil rights. We had our eyes on the prize and we held on. Hold on. You gotta hold on. For 26 days, unafraid, 125 people with and without disabilities stayed. They had their eye on the prize and they held on. Well, 44 years have rolled on past to the door.
Wow.
But we still must fight for 504.
I don't know.
We have our eyes on the prize and we'll hold on. Hold on. You gotta hold on. And keep your eye on the prize. Keep your eye on the prize. Oh, keep your eye on the prize. Hold on. I wanted to talk about a woman who was a friend of mine. I'm going to take this.
All right, let me help you.
Thank you, baby. Just grab that, please.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, no, I won't be banging into the microphone. Judy Heumann has written a book, which Christy will tell you about a little later on. And there are other people that have been highlighted as heroes of the 504 demonstration. And Judy Heumann was absolutely one of the power brokers, one of the true leaders of the demonstration. To tell you the truth, 504 was led by women of Berkeley, particularly women with disabilities. There was a planning meeting the night before that had one fellow, a guy named Dick Santos, a guy with visual disabilities who's since passed. Kitty Cohen has since passed. And Mary Jane Owen, along with Judy Heumann, met under my office, ground floor office, and they planned what the details were going to be about the way the demonstration was going to unfold. Because I had left the meeting earlier that day to get the bullhorn, I wasn't told there was going to be a sit-in. I just thought it was going to be a demonstration. So at 5 o'clock, Judy Heumann rolled up to me and said, "Did you bring your toothbrush?" It was a complete surprise to me that we were going to be staying. But as I said, as a feminist, as a father that was responsible for the care of his son, I went home and came back every day when I could and always played and brought new songs to the demonstrators. Mary Jane Owen was the woman who said, "Let's make it a sit-in. Let's stay." Mary Jane Owen, who died 2 years ago at 90, came from a family where her parents were activist Methodist ministers. And she remembered as a 6-year-old child marching around the sanctuary at her church, singing what she called abolitionist songs, like John Brown's Body. So her roots of understanding music and social change rolled back in her memory to songs that rolled back in memory to pre-Civil War abolitionist days. As she went on in her life as a teenager, she was trained in nonviolence in a workshop for teenagers in Los Angeles. And she needed that training because they demonstrated all summer for integrating one of the pools in Los Angeles to Bimini Beach. In the course of those demonstrations, the police turned fire hoses on them, just as they did in Selma, that we all remember from.
Just kind of watching time.
Yeah. She was, a shop window was shattered. She was cut by flying glass. So she understood the power of peaceful civil disobedience. And she brought that consciousness to the planning for the demonstration. She was truly the moral, the spiritual leader of the demonstration. And as she went on in life, she continued as an activist in every role she took. Christy reminds me of time, and I can't get lost in these stories. But suffice to say that
we probably do a show on Mary Jane Owen. I think that'd be a great show.
That's a good idea.
Absolutely.
But Mary Jane Owen is one of the unsung heroines or heroes. I've been corrected on that. That heroes is a universal word for both sexes. One of the unsung heroes of the disability rights movement. And this show, that song, this segment, may I dedicate to my dear friend and champion, Mary Jane Owen.
Great. So I think we're ready to move on to our next section, which is climate crisis.
Climate crisis.
Wind on the water, evermore. Erie's breezes building power from the lake's eternal breath. Graceful plate so cleanly turning as our weary planet rests. Great-grandfathers sailed the schooners before Cleveland's towers grew. Toward our city's mighty destiny, sails swept as Erie blew. Wind on the water, there is wind on the water. There is wind on the water, evermore. Yes, there Yes, turbans are the answer, but the choice is yours and mine. There is wind on the water, there's power in the breeze. There is wind on the water, see the turbine spin increase. Wind on the water, there is wind on the water, there is wind on the water, evermore. Yes, there is wind on the water, there is wind on the water, there is wind on the water, evermore. There is wind on the water, evermore. And there is wind on the water, evermore. Industrious.org, become a champion, add your voice. Thank you very much.
So Jeff, tell us about that song. Our guests, the Taylors, aren't quite with us yet. So I know that was what year?
2007. Yeah, in 2006, I think it was, or maybe it was 2007. I was approached by Sarah Taylor, who is one of the remarkable people who has been an activist for social change all her life. For example, she brought racial harmony to Cleveland Heights when it was a community being torn by racial strife and a terrible type of shattering of communities called block busting that was happening then. And she brought people who were white and people who were black together in her living room and said, let's form an organization to stop this. And she did, and they did. She decided that National Public Radio should come to Cleveland, and she took action. And as an activist, saw to it that WCPN came to Cleveland, and it happened, NPR in Cleveland. So Sarah added her prodigious energy then to concern about the climate and sustainable energy and pollution, and formed Windustrious.org. Are they here?
No, I don't see them on the screen yet.
Okay. So Windustrious.org is an organization, as I said, formed by Sarah with strong support from her husband, Phil Taylor. I will tell you that Phil Taylor is still active as a theoretical physicist teaching at Case Western Reserve University. He's world renowned in his field, and his knowledge of science has helped to break the myths that have long stood in the way of wind energy. And when they get on the call, we'll talk about that a bit more.
Yes, they're a delightful couple. I call them the original power couple. Oh,
Here
I
we
think
are.
they're coming in now.
But wait. Oh, look who's at the door.
Oh, yes. Welcome, Taylors.
Oh, thank you so much.
I don't think you heard what I said. I just gave a long introduction
We
to
did.
Windustrious. You did hear it.
She said they did.
Okay.
Hear it. Great.
We heard it all.
Did I get anything wrong?
No, not a thing. No.
Okay. Well, Sarah, why don't you tell us about what Windustrious.org is and what your idea was to create it?
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Well, it was the idea that we had this wonderful, free, everlasting, clean energy that we could use from our Great Lakes. And Cleveland was a great place to start it. And so I started Windustrious Cleveland. That was in 1976.
Wow.
It was, oh, sorry, I've got the date wrong. 2000, no, what was it? Sorry. at any rate, I would
2006, I think.
and yes, I'm confusing it with other projects. So 2006 is when I initiated the effort, and it just seemed a wonderful thing to be able to obtain our energy from this clean, everlasting, free resource. And I thought that by forming Windustrious Cleveland and attempting to get the groundswell rising up of citizens, I would ask if people wanted to become Windustrious champions. And Dennis Urich, a wonderful website creator, made the Windustrious Cleveland website. And shortly after that, at the beginning in 2006, and then at the beginning of 2007, I contacted Jeff, as he's already laid out, and asked if he would be a Windustrious champion. And he offered to write music for it, which has been a wonderful inspiration in the past, present, and ongoing. This wonderful Wind on the Water song. And he composed it within about a month or two of being asked that question. And then in July of the same year, he performed it live on stage, as you've just seen. Wonderful, downtown Cleveland at Ingenuity Fest. And that illustrates how not just innovative he is, but immediate in his skills and creativity. And so the idea is to build up the groundswell. Nothing financial in it, is just to try and encourage the public. And it that's what it does and continues to do, despite the opposition that I have to say is certainly in Ohio is very strong with the existing sources of energy production like nuclear and fossil fuels. So we're still working hard at trying to bring it to fruition, offshore wind.
Well, Sarah, I think any activist knows that resilience is an absolute requirement if you're going to be successful. And think about the kind of resilience it's taken for you to stand up to the giant corporations that are in opposition to free energy. What kind of opposition? What happened? How did they resist?
Well, they've just recently, for instance, been very clever at depriving the Renewable Energy Institute and and the all the resources, like solar as well as onshore wind, having subsidies of some small amount, but nevertheless adequate to really push things ahead. And they've been very effective with the legislature recently, these fossil fuel and nuclear powerhouses, in reducing that to zero, the subsidy. So that's an example of how they've managed to. And so the big money in the old-fashioned, dirty sources of energy have managed to convince legislators to follow their lead, or shall we say money bags.
Yeah, the word dirty has been given a whole new lease of life by some of the activities,
yes,
the utilities in particular.
Yes. Yes. Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question, Jeff. But
oh no, yeah. quite. And Phil, you're demonstrating just like Christy and I, how the two of you are a partnership. As Christy said, the true first power, I wouldn't say the first power couple, right. That would kind of date them a little pre even Taylor history.
Well, what I'd like to say about the Taylors, this is one of the fun things for me when Jeff and I became a couple in beginning of 2011. I moved to Cleveland to be close to Jeff and to be close to his brother. And so I got to meet this fabulous couple. They lived right around the corner from Jeff. And it's just, can you tell they're from England?
Actually, isn't that a Cleveland Heights accent? I thought you acquired that.
We try hard.
And they just have, I was there with Jeff until 2017. So 6 years.
14, I guess. 14. yeah,
14.
yeah.
Oh, time flies. But anyway, we got to visit each other on different occasions, and they came to our wedding celebration. And so it's just been delightful for me to meet such fabulous people. Now, do we know what Phil does?
Well, as I said, Phil is a theoretical physicist teaching at Case Western Reserve University and publishing internationally. And as I said, regarded
Yeah,
for
all sorts
his-
of very, very difficult stuff that none of you would understand at all. So
But
I won't bother trying to explain it.
but the most
Yeah.
fun thing he
you
does,
might be kidding. It happens to be the truth.
the most fun thing he does is how many dialects can you do, Phil?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I do these journeys around England where I start with the West Country where they speak like this. Then I go to Wales where they speak with a Welsh accent. And you go to Ireland where they speak like that. Oh, there's Northern Ireland where that's a different accent. And there's Scotland too, there's Glasgow. And there's Edinburgh, it's rather more of a refined Scottish accent. And I can keep going
They're
till you're very,
wonderful,
very,
aren't
very
they?
tired of it. But,
You can see what fun they are,
But-
even though
but-
they're so serious about some things.
But Phil, I have heard at seminars where I was asked to play, I've heard Phil just knock away like badminton birds, the myths
Mhm.
about wind energy and, for example, birds. Why don't you tell us, Phil, what's the truth about wind turbines and birds?
oh, it's an ongoing battle between birds and wind turbines. These birds, they come and they've got weight of numbers with them, so they mob the wind turbines and they beat at the blades with their wings and they do all sorts of no, actually, wind turbines and birds get on very, very nicely together. The birds are not stupid. They can see the wind turbines and they can fly in other directions when they see a blade coming down. And the blades go around very slowly, once every few seconds. The real danger to birds are buildings and cats
Yeah.
and climate change.
Mhm.
Climate change is destroying habitat. And so it's rather sad that there are some people who call themselves environmentalists and they think they're trying to support birds by trying to stop wind turbines growing. Whereas in fact, what they're doing is just increasing the intensity of climate change.
Yeah.
That is in fact killing more birds than even cats do.
Yeah.
Almost as many as buildings.
Now, I'll tell you what, this is a great segue into Jeff's new song. Tell us about your new song, Jeff.
Well, first of all, let's just close it out with Phil and Sarah. Thanks for coming on to the show. And I recommend that all of you go to windustrious.org and check out what true activists are doing to help save the planet. Phil and Sarah, thank you for your
Thank
life's
you so
work,
much,
and
you
thanks for
guys.
coming on today.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Enjoy
Bye.
listening to your song.
thank you. We'll see you when we get to Cleveland this fall.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Lovely.
lovely.
Okay, so
I was listening to a podcast by James Carville, and he was talking with Jane Fonda, who is, of course, one of the great champions of the climate movement. And he said, the problem with the climate movement is you don't have any music, and all social movements need music. How well I know that. It's that understanding that has spurred me into applying music to social change in schools and social change in the environment, as we were speaking about supporting wind energy. So James Carville said there was no music. I said, I can take care of that. And that day I wrote a song, and I called around the next day and found a studio in San Diego near where we live within which I could get recording studio time every week. And over a period of 4 short 4-hour sessions, we recorded the song you'll hear next. And it is about climate crisis, and that's the name of the song, Climate Crisis.
More hurricanes are storming, more funnel clouds are forming, hailstones grow larger every year. Ocean water rises, wetlands are in crisis, flood waters are rising very near. We can change it if we will. We must change it. Wildfires spread, forest trees are dead, summers grow hotter every year. Snow is falling deeper, Mercury's plunges steeper. Nothing can stop it now, I fear. We can change it if we will. We must change it. Cold keeps getting colder, winter storms are bolder, ice is quickly melting at the poles. Planet's heat is searing, species disappearing. There is nothing I can do now, I suppose. We can change it if we will. We must change it. We must change it. We must change it. It will kill. It will kill. It will kill.
Wow, Jeff, that was quite different from your style. Tell me about that.
I guess I was moved to write it that way because I thought that a song that expressed urgency was required.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about the psychology of the various melodic lines and the words, how they fit together, and how the song concluded with this urgent. This is no longer let's be nice about this. It's time to get real.
Right, and you included interesting instruments because this is a world crisis, and so tell us a little bit about your instruments.
Well, I wanted to give it a world sound, so I played a number of indigenous instruments which I had purchased, typically from people who made them in my travels as I worked around the country and the world.
Well, we're going to be able to share those at another time. I'm so glad that you thought of that to, make this a world thing, because it certainly is a world thing. And while the song was playing, we were showing you and your grandsons,
2 of my 3 grandsons,
in the studio. And as I recall, 2 pictures are showing them actually recording, singing.
Scott Angel,
Scott and Jeremy
Angel,
right?
yeah.
And then the third picture, you are coaching Jeremy. So you're standing behind him in the control room. Is
Yes.
that what you call that part?
Yeah.
And you've got your arms over his shoulders and you're kind of showing him by elevating and
Where the melody would go. Yes,
Right,
that's
right,
right. Yeah.
right. And they certainly had a good time doing that. They were just delighted. It was the first time you had to see them because of COVID.
Because
in
of,
a
yes,
year.
in a year. And it was the 3rd time my daughter Laura had recorded on one of my projects.
Okay.
So it was a great opportunity to reunite the two of us. But that chorus you hear, it's as I wrote in the press release, it certainly is not inclusive of all aspects of human diversity. But we do have an African American vocalist and a lesbian vocalist, and my grandsons who represent a different generation, actually three generations in the song. And there also is a Mexican American vocalist who is a friend of ours. So we reached as far as we could in a short amount of time. We have a friend with a disability that was to record, but she had a health crisis
Right.
and couldn't make the date.
But she is going to be a guest on
She'll
our
be a guest on
show
our show at
later,
another time.
show.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can move along now to our next segment. It's the education corner.
Yes. So let's change places.
Okay.
Now, I think we've already done the segue for it.
Well, that's all right.
So
Just
I'm going to
switch.
get up.
Now, if you go over my head,
I'll go over
I'll
your
go
head.
under your- There we go.
This is the part of the sausage making you're not supposed to see.
Let me get my props here. So first of all, if you people that are watching want to do a little more research or just find out more about the topics of today's show, we're going to first share with you 3 books that would go along with the 504 regulations segment of the show. And the first book is Becoming Real
Yes,
by
becoming
Holland
DeLille.
DeLille. Thank you. Holland DeLille. And as you can see, it's a lot of photographs. And Jeff's in 3 of them. And there he is, the bottom there with black hair and your bullhorn.
Lynn is a photojournalist who was also a demonstrator.
Yeah.
So she lived 26 days and took photographs that are a fabulous photo history of the demonstration.
Now, can people get this on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay, so you can get this on Amazon, Becoming Real in 24 days. The second book I want to show you is written by Judy Heumann. And it's let me just say what she says, an unrepentant memoir of a disability rights activist. And that's also available.
And the title of that book is
Becoming Human. Her last name is Human, and that's how you spell her last name. Becoming Human.
and spell it, why don't you, for those of us who can't see.
Heumann. And Judy developed polio when she was 18 months old.
Contracted polio.
Contracted.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
And so she's grew up from an infant with a disability, and she talks about that in her book.
And I would say, just on the side note there, that it was because of the activism of her mother that Judy was able to attend public school. Her mother was a staunch believer in Judy's educational rights.
Awesome. Well, and I know one thing, I don't know a lot about Judy. I just got her book and going to be reading it, but I know one thing she did. She was, I believe, the first teacher in New York State that they had to award a teaching certificate. They denied her because she was in a wheelchair, and she fought that and did win. And so she became a certificated teacher in New York State. So she's been an activist her whole life. And then the third book, guess who? This is Jeff's book called Grit, a family memoir of adversity and triumph. And tell us a little bit about your book, Jeff.
Well, I'm not going to get into it in detail, but it covers the story of my life and my brother's life. And integrated into that is my time with the 504 demonstration.
And the second part now that I want to share for educators, and you know, we're all educators. If you're a parent, you're educating your children. If you're teachers, of course, that's your career. And so this really applies for everybody. And be sure to go to the Sarah Taylor's website, windustrious.org, and you will find such a wealth of information, lesson plans for kindergarten through 12, games, puzzles, and I don't know if you know this about me, folks, but I was a teacher for 50 years. And I just loved when I could get my hands on some good, rich resources. And you will find that if you visit Sarah's website. And so I think that's it for Education Corner.
And I should say, honey, that you're still a teacher. You teach me constantly. You're always finding rich things to bring into our life, into our discourse.
Once a teacher, always.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful you're a student.
Okay, now the last section of our show today is called Send Me or Send Us Stuff. Okay, Send Us Your Music is something that we want everybody to do. We want you to, excuse me, tune in to we'repeoplefirst.com. Don't use the apostrophe in we're. It's WERE, peoplefirst.com. And there will be a form for you to fill out, very simple form about who you are. And then there's a 25-second karaoke clip that you can add your voices to.
You download the karaoke.
You download the clip and then add your voices to it, and then you drop it into the directions.
You upload it back up to the site.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we have a little sample for you. This is what we call our Texas family. And this is my daughter, her husband, and her two wonderful daughters, so my grandchildren.
The Kirk Williams family.
The Kirk Williams family. And so they did a little demonstration.
As a favor to
as
us.
a favor to us. And so that's what we're going to show you right now. This is George.
And what we're hoping is that you, any of whoever you are, we're looking for inclusivity. So perhaps in your family, you live multi-generationally in one home, or perhaps in your family, like in my cousin's family, it is a biracial family. They're two children with a different race than the parents in one family, in addition to a multi-generational family. So regardless of who it is that makes up your life, no doubt it's diverse. So we're looking for all aspects of diversity, even if it's you and your cat. And if your cat can sing, we'll have you on the show.
Absolutely. And then maybe you could, tell them how we get our dogs to sing along with you. Okay, we're going to now transition to showing you that clip right now.
People, just people, people living our lives. We're people, just people, and we're glad to be alive. Yes, we're glad to be alive. Glad to be alive.
Woo, Texas family.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Kelly. The thing I enjoy about that clip is its imperfection. I like the imperfection of the human voice. I like groups who sing that are not necessarily exactly doing it the way you would hear on an MP3 on MTV or whatever the current means of watching music on television is. So send us your imperfection.
Absolutely.
We're looking forward to it.
And you know what? Can you believe it? We've been on the air for 59 minutes.
Well, let me close it out then by saying this. Everything we've done today, we're all talking about activism, whether it's concerning disability rights, whether it's concerning wind power, or whether it's just the activism of joining a show to show your support and being active in the way you do that, adding your song. We are all here on this plane for a limited period of time. And as we look around us, we can see nothing but problems. And I think for any of us, the question is not at the end of the day, at the end of our lives, have we done great things? But have we done some things? Have we put our shoulder to the wheel? Have we added our voice? Have we spoken up? Have we stood up for justice? have we spoken out against injustice? So people first consciousness is seeing each other as whole and as our brothers and sisters. And let's do everything we can do to improve the planet while we're here, and including saving the planet for the next generations. So to close out, I will use 3 song titles that you're now familiar with. Because we're people first, we are survivors. And may you know peace, sweet peace.